I mean, working in marketing for the last 40 odd years, I've always been puzzled by how the accounts of human beings that you find in textbooks are so divorced from what I have to do, minute to minute and day to day. Our interaction, you and I right now, isn't well accounted for in textbooks. And yet the way we talk to each other and interact and learn from each other is what life for us is all about. So that there's been that gap. But then I was particularly, if you like, triggered to write the book about this time last year, at the beginning of the lockdown, when the accounts that I was seeing in the media seemed to me just like political talking points. I've been working in marketing for a long time, and so I can recognize the hallmarks of a political talking point, and I'm sure you can as well. Yeah. I'm sure you can sniff them out in a second. Because politicians are very practiced at coming up with us and them type situations, and also distilling very, very complicated policy matters into little slogans. And in my mind, what I was seeing in the news was not representative of the complexities of what was happening in the world. And I know you're extremely concerned about climate change, and I'm very concerned about the environment. But I'm also very concerned about the effect that I guess you could say sloganeering and tribal behaviors are having on the mental health of people. And I believe that right now the situation is almost running out of control. And particularly in the United States, you're getting these two, to oversimplify things, you're getting these two tribes forming. I call the one the blue tribe, which is sort of the more academic way of looking at the world. And then you're getting the red tribe that doesn't see the world in the same way. They're not so beholden to, if you like, scientific type theories. They're more deferential to heritage and religion and God and country, so to speak. And these two tribes are drifting further apart. It's been made worse by Trump. And we're getting to a point where these two groups just do not understand each other. And they're talking past each other. And that is making it very hard for us as a society to actually tackle the things that need tackling so desperately. Overfishing, desecration of wildlife habitats, alternative energy forms that we need. We have a culture now of name calling, and it's not taking us anywhere good. In fact, I believe that with the increase in anxiety, especially amongst the younger generation, it very likely is going to be catastrophic. And I feel very bad for future generations. So it's a long way of saying that I wrote the book to say that we collectively need to wake up to the realities of how human beings operate. We need to know what's happening inside our brain, and we need to recognize our instant and fluid tribalism and these instant emotional reactions we have to words. And we've got to coach ourselves to say, like, slow down. When you hear a word like, who knows what, Trump or Republican or climate change or whatever it is, we've got to coach ourselves to slow down and say, precisely what do you mean by that? Because it's never simple.
Do you really think that's possible?
I'm not sure. I really am not sure. I think there's hope if there's a small number of curious people who can spread the word about wisdom. And you don't need that many people to point out that our current mythologies about the brain and education are completely divorced from the discoveries of frontline scientists, and that we need to just face reality. But one of my realizations, I suppose, and this is from doing 40 years of marketing and observing what's happening on social media, is that people love a fight. They like to identify with their team, and they like to vilify an opponent. And it's a very, very easy way of engaging people. And you see that happening all the time in the news. And unfortunately, you see it happening in academic institutions. Academic institutions, certainly in the social sciences, they create these, opposing tribes, and it's easy to make young people angry, and that anger doesn't lead necessarily to anywhere good. And I think we need to wake up to the realities of what we're doing in academia.
This is another edition of the Conversation Lab. My name is Don Schaefer, and today we're speaking with Tom Beakbane, the author of How to Understand Everything, Consilience, A New Way to See the World. So whether it's Democrat or Republican, conservative or liberal, right versus left, we seem to be living in a more polarized world. So what has to change?
I think we have to. I think scientists and academics have to realize that the facts we understand are socially constructed. All the facts that you hear people, defending, they're all described by words, and words. The meaning of words is constantly evolving. You know that as a communicator. And I know it as a marketer, and politicians know that. We're constantly changing the meaning of words, and you can do it with ill intent, or you can do it with honor. And we need to understand the academic world needs to face up to how kids really learn, and the importance of developing skills in our teenagers and young adults, rather than teaching them ideologies, which I believe create feelings of, very often, of hate and fear. I know this contradicts, I think, many of your core beliefs, perhaps. I'm not sure. But, I listen to many of the guests on your podcast. I have to confess that I don't think in the same way as them. But at the same time, when I hear the introduction to your podcast, I'm thinking, Don is a man who has always tried to do good, and you like to promote genuine discussion and conversation and understanding, do you not?
I think the words we use, the conversations we have, and the ability to ask beautiful questions, to go beneath the surface, to give in the asking as much as the answering, is a real challenge. And like you, I think we need to do more of it. Whether it's about race, religion, sexuality, climate change, we need to have more real conversations.
Mm-hmm. So let's just look at climate change, because I have a different perspective on climate change, because I look at the psychology of it, and I say to myself, as someone who's concerned about the environment, I say, if it happened that scientists discovered that the world was actually cooling for whatever reason, let's just say we made that discovery, and that the effect of CO2 wasn't as pivotal as we imagine it to be, would we still want to give up on the whole ethos of climate change? And my position would be no. It doesn't matter what the science. And when I use the science, I use air quotes, because frankly, the science is extraordinarily interesting and complicated. I find it really disturbing that the political talking heads have managed to hijack the meaning of the word science, and it's used in the sense of a consensus of experts, because that's not my experience of reading scientific papers. I go really deep on climate change, because I believe there are a whole lot of things that could be so much better with society if we had a deeper sensitivity towards the natural environment, and we weren't creating the amounts of garbage that we are, and shipping things to the extent that we are. That there's so many things that we need to be addressing. But I go deep to this extent. Every stage of human history, people have been concerned, anxious, particularly young people, like teenagers. They go through a stage of deep anxiety. And the question is, how can we channel that anxiety to something productive? Because if you channel that anxiety towards what I would call tribal hatreds and fear of the future, you end up with nihilism and people taking drugs and committing suicide. And it's it's not good. So I look at the word climate change as what I call a tribal banner, and depending on which tribe you're a member of, it strikes you differently. And if you look at what's happening inside our brain when we use a word like tribal climate change, you realize, how incredibly immediately dipolar the brain is. I mean, it's what we do all the time with every single person and every single word. It's instantly reacting. Now that doesn't jive with traditional academic views of how a brain works, where we think that it works using knowledge and rationality and so on. But we've got to get rid of the mythology and look at how people actually work. And we've got to figure out ways that we can get people to live together without fear. And so they feel positive and empowered. And if they feel positive and empowered, then we can actually do something about all of the things that we need to address. The contrary argument, Don, and this is where it becomes very, very interesting. And I frankly, I don't have any answers. In order to galvanize people to action, you've got to simplify things. In other words, you've got to become a politician and condense things down into simple talking points. And most people don't have the stomach for detail. But in order to get things done constructively, we need to understand the complexities of situations. To imagine that we're somehow going to stop the climate from changing by putting up a wind turbine and a solar panel in Canada is crazy. We need to be far, far more sophisticated than that. And the question is, how do you galvanize people about complex topics without talking down to people and simplifying things? And I don't know the answer to that.
I was hoping you were about to tell us. I wonder sometimes, because we seem to have become more polarized, more isolated in our particular tribe or point of view. So how does Consilience help?
I think Consilience really helps, because I think once you understand how our brain works, you realize, and this is going to sound overblown, but pretty much every word we use is a form of bonding, because the way we use language is it's a way that brings people together. And when you're talking to your sister and you wander into areas relating to Trump and who knows, gun control and all of the things that divide the blue tribe from the red tribe, you're encountering words that are tribal banners. And I would say that once you realize the fallibilities and the power of words, you can explore those tribal banners together. And it actually helps you to have a meeting of the minds. You now not necessarily agree, but you can have a meeting of the minds in that you understand why the person believes the things that they do. I'll give you one or two little examples. And one of the delights of writing this book has been that periodically, every day or two, I get an email from somewhere in the world from a person who's read the book, and sometimes they have strange ideas. But when we get to talk, I find that we can be very much on the same page, and the words I put in the book help them. But let's say. Let's pick a word like creationism. So if you had used that word with me 5 years ago, let's say, I would have had an instant allergic reaction to it, because I'm deeply scientific. And so, to me, you either believe in evolution or you believe in creationism. Creationism is what I would call a tribal banner. It's a word that reflects the different tribes' way of thinking about the world. So I love reading about history, and you realize once you actually start to dig into creationism, you realize that it was never a story of ignorant Americans rejecting evolutionary theory and Darwin's theories. That whole movement was a reaction to monism and Volkism that triggered the First World War, which were powerful ideologies that had resulted from Darwinism being sort of combined with German culture and philosophy. And so the reaction against